Hey everybody, I'm Nick Baldwin of BloodyElbow.com. That is Mike Biggie Rhodes, who takes on Christian Torres tomorrow night at LFA 68 in Prior Lake, Minnesota. Mike, how are you, man?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. We have done this a lot. We've done a lot of different interviews. Nothing quite like this. We're gonna learn a lot about Mike Biggie Rhodes. I know there's been stories on UFC.com about you in the past, but I feel like every time I talk to you, it's, what do you think about your opponent? What will you make it back to the UFC one day? Fight stuff. And I want to not talk about MMA. Maybe at the end we'll talk about this fight and where you go from here. It's a bit of a comeback fight for you. You haven't been as active, but I want to go back to your childhood because you have a very crazy story. And I honestly, we've done a lot of interviews, but I don't know the story of Mike Biggie Rhodes and how you've sort of gotten to be who you are and transition to MMA and things like that. So let's start from the beginning. How would you describe how your childhood went? We're going back a little while, but from going back, how would you describe growing up?
I grew up a little wild, a little rough around the edges. That I think most boys do. But you put a kid in the inner city of a pretty well-known place, like it from where I'm from, like Waterloo, Iowa. Like anybody in Iowa or kind of the surrounding cities or states kind of know about where I grew up. And sports, just a regular guy, just kind of running the neighborhood, trying to be like everybody that I saw, trying to be an athlete, thinking that athlete was the only way to make it out, and just kind of. I was rough, man. I was a really rough kid, so I got into a lot of trouble. My mom probably didn't appreciate the level of trouble that I got into, but for the most part, I never did anything like too serious,
okay.
I stayed on the line.
Okay.
Put my toe on it a couple times, but I knew better because my mom raised me right. So I tried to venture out as much as possible, but I was kept in check for the most part.
Trouble. What does that entail?
Fighting. I've always been kind of no nonsense. I wouldn't say like I had a very bad temper or anything like that, but I was not one to like put up with anybody else like trying to do something to me or my friends. Like I was just never the type to back down to anyone, no matter their age, their size, their background. It didn't really matter to me, but I think that is indicative of where I grew up. If you did back down, you would be seen a certain way, and then people would start to do that to you more and more and more. We call it like checking. Like they would check you every time they seen you if they knew they could. And so my thing was, I would rather lose the fight than not fight, and then lose respect or be seen as someone that could be picked on, or allow my friends to be picked on. I've always seen myself as like the protector type.
So you grew up in Waterloo, Iowa, small town. Big in the middle?
I think it's in the middle. It's a city,
Okay.
So it's not the biggest city in Iowa. There's a few others that are bigger, but it's pretty well known. I think for me, it seemed big enough, when I was smaller, but now it's like living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's, I always say it's a smaller version of Milwaukee because Milwaukee's huge, obviously. We're a little bit smaller, but it still has that big city vibe, even though we're smashed in by cornfields,
What was life like in Waterloo?
Not a lot to do.
No?
So, we don't have pro teams or anything like that in Iowa, period. High school sports are big where I'm from. We're one of those kind of cities. Basketball was known, what my high school that I originally went to was known for. They weren't known for the football at the time that when I went there. But, it's one of those sports towns where high school's huge. The college teams are even bigger. Our college teams are like our pro teams. So growing up in Waterloo, you pick a side and you kind of ride with it, and that's pretty much how that was. But Waterloo, you kind of either stayed to your own, or you were kind of friends with everybody, kind of thing. But my family is so big that like my family is like Waterloo. It's one of those places where everybody claims to be a cousin, everyone claims to be a relative of some sort, especially now. But we are pretty tight. We're like even a cousin, a friend, you would consider them almost like a cousin because. It's not that big of a place. It's like you still know everybody's business kind of thing.
You were adopted, right? By your aunt, was it? Great aunt?
Great aunt.
Great aunt. what was it like being adopted? Did people get on your back for that? Was there anything like that, or?
So for me, growing up, I really didn't know. My biological mother was addicted to drugs and in and out of prison and in and out of jail and stuff like that, moving away, moving back. So I never had a relationship with her like whatsoever. And I didn't really understand, adoption or what it meant when I was a young kid. I just knew that Sandra Harmon was my mom, and that's all I knew. My sisters were my sisters. To me, it was never broken down, or I was never seen as like an adopted kid to my mom and my sisters.
Sandra's your great aunt.
Yes, right? She's my great aunt. So for me, I've always been brother or uncle or whatever. I've never been like, hey, that's my adopted anything. Like, that's not a word that has ever been used, and I never felt like I got any less love. I think if you ask my sisters, they'll tell you my mom actually, or my great aunt, who I consider my mom, loved me more. I was the one that was always the favorite, like it's vocalized. They know I am the favorite. And there's such a big gap in between me and them. I'm 29. They're pushing the big 50. I won't give their age out exactly because you don't do that, and they still call me, like I'm their protector. I'm their brother. But my other side of the family might have seen the adoption a little bit different, because I'm the type that I kind of stay where I'm welcomed and where I'm loved and where I feel the most comfortable. I don't try to put myself out there to be friends with people or even relatives. I don't really go out to seek their approval, but if you wanted to be in my life, you're in my life. And the other side of my family didn't really understand that. And so they thought my mom was like trying to keep me away from them and stuff like that. That was never the case.
And that's your dad's side of
no, my biological mom's side.
Okay.
So even though, within the same family tree or whatever, it's kind of segregated. You either hang out with this side of the family or that side of the family. And I think now that we're older, we all kind of do it. But when we were younger, it was a lot of tension in the situation. They felt like my grand aunt stole me away. She never allowed me to go see that side of the family. But my thing is, I was so loved and so taken care of, I didn't feel the need to go to these other family events or these things that they wanted to put together or try to force me into having a relationship with my mother when she wasn't acting like a mother at the time. And so for me, I didn't want to deal with that kind of stuff. So it built up tension in the family that is still there to this day. Last time I was home, I was talking with my grandmother, who's I think 93 or 94 now, and she's still full of life. You can't slow her down. Right. But she's the one who speaks her mind, and she speaks on the situation, and it kind of hit a spot with me because I still kind of felt like maybe they were trying to attack my mom in some kind of way, my great aunt. But that's the only mom I've ever known. So for me, you can't speak bad about her or any way and think that I'm going to be okay with it. It's just not something that's going to happen. So I think we've all understood, and my cousins, there's a lot of males that they understand the situation. They've never treated me any different. And I feel like now our family is matured enough to understand the situation and see both sides.
Where was your dad when you were growing up?
Who knows? You know what I mean? I don't have my father's last name. Okay. My last name, Rhodes, comes from my middle sister. My sister who's just older than me, her father's name. Okay. That's who my mother was with at the time, and he allowed me to have his name, kind of thing. But he's not my father. And so my actual biological father obviously was addicted to drugs and doing the same thing my mother was doing. So I've only had brief interactions with him, maybe once at a birthday when I was 12 or something like that. No actual connection where I would ever call him dad or consider him my father. My great aunt, who's my mother, her long time, even though they weren't married, they were together for 20, 30 years type of thing. And his name's Cornell. He's my dad. He's my father.
And that's Cornell Rhodes.
Right? Yeah. No, Hoosman. No? Hoosman is his last name. Rhodes is, like I said, the Rhodes, he actually passed away in a fire, I believe. Maybe shortly after I was born type of thing. So I've never even met him, and I have his last name. So when people are like, hey, are you related to his? I'm really not. So I don't know a lot of the Rhodeses or anything like that.
Even though your great aunt took you and raised you and was your mother, essentially, was it still difficult in the back of your mind knowing you had your biological parents out there and they were doing out there whatever?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Okay.
I didn't care.
No?
Honestly, I think I've always been like an old soul, a mature soul. Like I understood situations that maybe even adults didn't understand or didn't want to understand. I accepted it early on. They were there for a reason, right? They had me. I'm very grateful for that. You know what I mean? Like I'm not, saying like, oh, I wish I never was born. That's not the case. Like I'm very happy I was born when I was, and that the situation happened the way it is, because I don't think I would be where I am now. I don't think I would be the kind of person that I am if I wasn't, adopted, or my mother didn't step in and take that role as the mother in my life. And so for me, I never even really looked at them as like a bad thing. Like, like you had some problems going on in your life. You couldn't take care of me. And I feel like if they would have tried, I probably would have turned out different, maybe for the worse. Who knows? And so for me, I never looked at it that way. I was just like, you're not in my life at this point. I'm not going to give you that title, just because you birthed me. That doesn't mean you deserve that title, And so for me, I was loved. I was too loved to care about people who didn't seem to love me or show me that kind of affection. But for me, like I said, man, I never wanted for anything. I never, needed to ask anybody for anything. It was always taken care of in home or in house, my sisters, stuff like that. So for me, I didn't need to seek other people's love or approval.
You mentioned your sisters are quite a bit older than you. So when you started living with your great aunt, were they still around? Were they living with?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was adopted from birth. So like, boom, baby, fresh newborn, right away, the whole shebang. So they actually did a huge part of like raising me, black families. They're normally a little bit more close-knit than maybe other people's type of idea of family. Like, what do I mean by that is like they kind of stay home more so than a lot of other cultures and other people's backgrounds. Like they kind of go out and do their own thing. They leave the city, they leave the town. My family stayed together, very close-knit. If my mom lived here, my sister probably moved to live here, that kind of thing. So they were always there, because if my mom ever needed anything working, there was no, hey, let's find a babysitter. It was a babysitter. It was always sister takes care of brother, or sister takes care of other sister, or niece or nephew. And so that was always kind of our dynamic growing up. So like for me, they've never looked at me as anything other than brother, like adopted brother, this and that. It never came out of their mouth. Same thing for my nieces and nephews. I'm in no one's eyes, except for maybe the court of law, was I adopted. You know what I mean? Sure. So for me, nothing has ever been different.
You mentioned in your childhood things were rough. Mm-hmm. In what way? How so?
I think maybe I made it rougher than it had to be, just because of, like I said, how I grew up. You know what I mean? Like, the neighborhood, the people, everybody in the neighborhood isn't good. Every time you step outside, you don't see the best things always in the type of neighborhood that I grew up in, and I say it that way because I don't want to glorify anything that was like going on, but those were like our idols, or the people we had to look up to, at that point. And so maybe I think, trying to be like other people in the neighborhood, or, doing things that way, made it a little bit rougher, and I'm the only boy, my two sisters, my mom, I was like the only boy. Cornell, who I consider to be my father, he got into trouble as well. So he was in prison for a very, very long time. And so I had no real male figure in my life. So, I made a post on Instagram not too long ago, just, kind of commending myself, for how I grew up and how I carry myself, or how I try to carry myself. Obviously I make mistakes, I'm human, but, I think that I could have turned out, and I look back at the neighborhood and I see how some of my friends and some of my family members turned out. I see a totally different road I could have taken, or path I could have went down, a different person I could be. And I think genuinely as a person, I feel like I'm a good person, and I always try to be a better person. And that's something that's like very important to me, because I feel like I didn't have that growing up, and I feel like I can be that for other kids and other people, my own family, as they grow up. I don't necessarily need to go outside of my own family, even though I feel like I do. I feel like now I can be that male role model that they can look up to, like being so much younger than my sisters, I have nieces and nephews who are older than me.
Right.
You know, and I feel like I can even be a positive movement or role model for them. You know, even my sisters, you know, they look at the success and the things that I've done, and they tell me I inspire them, or that I help them to want to, you know, do it for themselves, or help their children to, you know, push that envelope, whether it was going to college, graduating for college, if it was just how I took care of myself in school and things of those nature. I feel like that's something that helped me, and like now it continues to help me, but that's something that I could have definitely went the other way, you know, so that's big.
School. What was school like? Middle school, high school, all of it. How would you describe that?
So elementary schools, man, I went to them all. Every elementary school, like in my city or in our area, I went to. Mostly because I got kicked out of the majority of them for fighting or, you know, causing problems. My thing was this. Even in middle school, I would get in trouble for this. School was so easy. School was easy for me. I would go to class and get my work done like as the teacher is talking. So the class for me was over. I'm drumming on the desk. I'm being the class clown. I was being a disruption. So that's what I would get in trouble for the most part. But it was because I was bored, you know. So I got into, you know, accelerated programs and classes right away. You know, in middle school, I would, you know, go to the high school and take a math class or something like that, because the math that I was taking just wasn't, you know, at my level, you know, if that makes sense. So that's what I got in trouble for a lot of stuff because I was bored. And then obviously you throw fighting and stuff like that on top of it. And, you know, I'm a troubled youth. I have issues learning. I have these things, but it was more so just getting in trouble, man. I literally got kicked out of one school. I had to go to another, you know, mid semester, and then at the end of that year, I got in trouble for something else. You know, it was self-inflicted, but yeah, you know. And then high school was cool. My high school is a little rougher. It was a little rougher of a high school, but okay. For the most part, I fit in. All my friends went there. Everybody I played basketball and stuff growing up with from 8th grade went to the same high school. We all kind of tried to stay together and continue playing basketball and with our sports and things of that nature. But ultimately, as a junior, I ended up transferring to a private school for my senior year, and I ended up finishing out school there. But same thing, you know, if I got in trouble in high school, it's because I was bored. You know, I was still in elevated classes, you know, accelerated reading. I was, you know, I think I took geometry as like a freshman or a sophomore, or calculus by the time I was a junior. So like for me, it was like school was always easy. So What do I do after I've already done the schoolwork? Drum on the desk. I draw something that would like get me in trouble. So yeah.
The thing with being bored, what do you think made you or led you to doing these things that disrupted class and got you in trouble? Because there are people that get bored in class that don't do those things, right?
Yeah. My personality. Yeah, I think it's just my personality. I'm always on the go. Like, I like to be busy. I like to be doing things. And I feel like if I would have been challenged, I think my outcome in those situations might have been different. But, I mean, you look at the school system where I went to school at, you know, an inner city high school. You know, we didn't always have the most as far as like, you know, we didn't have the same resources. So what is one kid's board could be another kid's, you know, computer or something at another school, or given another opportunity to try and disperse that energy in a positive way instead of in a negative way. And I feel like it just negative way always found me, and it was easier. So yeah.
You mentioned that middle schools, you know, they were a bit rougher, but you fit in. Is that why you fit in? Because they were rougher and that was what you were used to, or do you just mean you fit in with certain friends and classmates?
I think I just fit in, period. I think that's one of the things that I've been blessed with, is the ability to fit into a situation or in a room or in, you know, there's not a lot of things that like I haven't got the chance to experience. So I feel like I can relate to a lot of people. And that was one of the big reasons why I went from the public school to the private schools, because I played basketball with a lot of these private school kids, like in different leagues and different things like that. And so the parents of those kids, they saw me like their child. They saw me like one of their kids. They didn't see, you know, the rough kid from the inner city that they were inviting into their school. They saw the well-behaved, intelligent kid that could fit in and do the things that their kids were doing. And I feel like I've always just kind of got along with everyone, even though I, got in trouble for fighting people and stuff like I said, it was more so for me, always just not allowing myself to be taken advantage of or bullied or put into a situation where I feel like my back was against the wall. I just was always maybe the aggressor, but for lack of a word, even though I wasn't like aggressive to like start the situation, more so I was a finisher. If you brought something to me, then I felt like I had to do a certain thing.
With getting into these fights, as you mentioned, you're not necessarily the aggressor, but they're the finisher. I mean, what is it? Again, going back to your personality, is that just what caused you to get into fights and get into that, that sort of,
I think, like I said, I think it's the way we're brought up and the way that we handle a lot of issues or problems is to fight. It's like second nature where I grew up. Like I always say it and I joke now because my best friends are the people that I get to punch in the face every day.
Right.
And it was like the same thing growing up. Like my best friends to this day, I've fought every single one of them. I can 100% say that. We've always fought. We shake hands, we dust it off, and we're good. But we've always settled our issues or problems that way. Maybe for lack of, understanding how to like talk or reason it out. But it was always, hey, you did this. I didn't like it. Let's fight. And then once we fight, it was like, hug it up, shake hands, be done with it. And literally that's what we did. So for me, maybe it wasn't seen as serious of a thing. Okay. For me, maybe it was just a thing that had to be done or needed to be done. And then we were cool after that.
Were you ever bullied? Did you ever experience bullying? No?
No, I couldn't be bullied, no. Man. Like, I'm bulletproof, man. Like when it comes to that kind of thing, like I was a bigger, fatter kid in high school and stuff growing up. Like people could try to use that, but like it never worked because I would like make fun of myself. Like it wasn't this thing to like be ashamed of or anything like that. And no, if you tried to bully me, you had to fight me. Right. Whether I win or lost, you knew every time you tried to do something to me, you were going to have to fight. And so at that point, I think people understood, hey, just leave him alone, kind of thing. And so, yeah.
What was the craziest fight you ever got into at school?
At school?
Or anywhere else, just not the cage.
When I was in college, my junior year of college, I left a 2-year. I graduated from a junior college, and I went to a 4-year UNI, University of Northern Iowa, which is pretty big. And I got in a fight with a football player from their school, and it didn't go his way. And so then like the following weekend, their team was out like looking for me, teammates and stuff like that. It never went anywhere past that for the most part, but. Yeah, just thinking about it, that was probably the one.
I would ask if having those guys coming after you, if that scared you, but based off I couldn't be bullied, I would take it you were pretty confident. If anyone came your way, you could hold your own. Yeah,
or I would fight them. And the thing is like, in my head, I also knew this. 90% of the people that play football on that team wasn't from that area. My whole family, my whole life, my whole existence was in Waterloo, Iowa, which was like a 5-minute drive. So like in my mind, I was like, I don't think they really want to do that because like you don't have the numbers. You might think you do, but you really don't. And then like a couple of my teammates that I went to junior college with was on that football team. And so once they found out it was me, they're like, oh, nah, we're not going to mess with Mike. Like, trust me, you don't want to do that. Like, we were at a junior college for 2 years together. They kind of knew who I was as a person and stuff like that. So it kind of all blew over, but it definitely could have went the wrong way.
I think you might have touched on this already, but what did your great aunt make of it? Is she probably not happy, but still on your side?
Yes, because I always followed the rule. The number one rule was that, well, I shouldn't say I always follow it, but the rule is like, if someone put their hands on you, you automatically have permission to end it, Sure. I wasn't allowed, like I said, to be the aggressor. I would always try to be like, hey, look, this is not something you want to do. This is not something we should do. But if you want to go there, then I would go there. So she always had my back in the matter that she knew that 9 out of 10 times I was not the one to start it. So for that ways, I was always in her good graces.
So you're a basketball guy, eh?
Yeah.
That was just growing up, that was a sport, or?
Honestly, I played every sport. Like, I played soccer in high school. I golfed. I played. Only thing I really didn't play was baseball, but that's just because not many people from where I was at was playing baseball.
Sure.
Tried hockey for a little bit, didn't stick. A couple of my friends ended up being really, really good at hockey, but that just wasn't my thing. Football was something that I was good at. Basketball was something that I was good at, and then ultimately, I played on AAU teams growing up. My AAU team time from when I was like a third grader all the way until I was a freshman in high school, we were ranked in the nation. We'd go and play everywhere. And then when I got in high school, I played for Martin Brothers, which was a Nike sponsored basketball team that had like the ESPN top 150 of Iowa on there. And we would travel around and play different cities and states and stuff like that, and play other very big name, players that went on to do good things. And so after breaking my leg playing football in high school, basketball was the better option as far as going to college and allowing that to pay for college. So that's ultimately why I chose basketball.
So you played basketball in college, right?
Yeah, I played 2 years at a year and a half at a junior college. Had an opportunity to continue playing elsewhere. But during that summer, that's when I started training MMA and found fighting and fought. And then I was like, I'm not going to school to play basketball. I want to fight. So I did it.
Did you consider yourself a good basketball player?
Yeah.
And if you make it to college, you have to be.
I consider myself a skilled player. I could shoot the ball really well. I was 270 pounds. I'm barely 6'1". So, wasn't the most gifted physically, but I could shoot the ball, and that made, and I played very physical defense, and I was able to dribble the ball, post and guard a lot of positions. So that made me valuable. So I was able to make it to college to play. And for me, that was always number one, is mom should not have to pay for college, because I knew my mom couldn't, So for me, it was get the scholarship so you can go to school, and so that it can be paid for the most part, And so for me, that was like the biggest thing.
Before we continue with the basketball talk, you mentioned your mom couldn't pay for your college.
Yeah.
How would you describe sort of just, not growing up necessarily with all, how going to school and that, but the house? I mean, was it a smaller house? Were you?
No, we had a decent sized house for where I lived at. Not maybe the nicest as far as like some of the other people what they had, but I was always taught at an early age, don't count other people's money. So whatever. And I can say this: no matter how bad things were at home, I didn't know. If a light bill didn't get paid or something had to go without being paid, it went, and my mom would always make sure I had what I needed. We always had what we needed, but we didn't have more.
Sure.
But which is not a bad thing. I wouldn't say that, lights maybe have been cut off, maybe, stuff like that. But like where I'm from, that's a norm. It's not something that, is frowned upon. Everybody kind of goes through those kind of things. And, my mom was a daycare provider for her entire life, so for me, it was always something like where I was always well taken care of, man. And like anything I needed, she found a way to get it, whether it was a clearance item or something like that. I would never know, but I knew I had those shoes to play basketball. I knew I had this shirt for school. I knew I had this, whatever I needed, she made it happen. And that's just, I think, the foundation of like a black mother kind of thing. Is people always say like, hey, I went without, hey, I didn't have this. But at the end of the day, if she could make it work, she did. Whether it was a seasonal job at Dillard's on top of what she already was doing, if it was another position, if it was this or that, she made it happen.
So these days, do you feel like people are too focused on wanting everything and wanting more?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of more is not bad, but I feel like the obsession that people put on it becomes bad or negative. For me, more is like more of a headache. Like if you have more money, people are like, oh, if I have more money, I'll be happier. With more money comes more problems as well. You know what I mean? Just like speaking literally, you make a lot of money, you got to deal with more tax things. You got to deal with more, people more so counting your money or always wanting to be involved in it. I feel like for me, I'm at like a perfect spot in my life. I don't need a lot. And I feel like that's where some people, like when they meet me or understand, like, man, I have shoes that I've had for 6 years, man. And like, oh, those new? I'm like, no. I just don't wear them often. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need a lot. I've always been that way, though. So, like, even if my mom kind of, early on in my years, like, hey, do you want this, this, and this? I'm like, nah. You know, I'd rather have 5 of the shoes that only cost you $19 rather than to have 1 pair of shoes that cost you $125. Yeah. I've just always been that way. You know, I've never been into fashion. I'm not into wearing the next big clothing line. Like, I own 1 pair of jeans and I'm not even sure if I can fit them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a sweatpants, basketball shorts, t-shirt kind of guy. Like, if I got to get dressed up, I ain't going kind of thing. You know, like, I got asked to go to weddings and stuff. I had nothing to wear. I would literally have to buy an outfit that day to go to these things. For me, those are things that I just don't need. They're not necessities in my life. I like really good food. I like the ability to maybe travel a little bit. I like to have the ability to treat my friends to things. That's it. I don't need a lot, you know? So it's like, people are like, yeah, you should probably be making more money doing this, or you could make more money. That's great, you know? And like, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't turn down a higher paying job, or I wouldn't turn down these things, but I'm not seeking them. They're not like a first thought in my mind type of thing.
People are too tough to please these days.
Yeah. And I think that's just a society that we're kind of making for ourselves right now. And it can be good. It can be bad, but too much of anything is bad.
Sure. Back to basketball. Was NBA on your radar before fighting, before MMA?
No.
No?
I'm a realist. I knew for a fact that with my physical gifts, my height, my size, I wasn't going to make it. And I think that's one of the things that allowed me to be as good as I was in the moment that I had in the sport, is because I knew, what could I use basketball for? Pay for college. I needed to make something that I had done for so long count for something, you know, and so it got college paid for the most part, you know, and so for me, that was it. But I knew I wasn't going to the NBA. I knew it wasn't like an overseas thing. I just knew it, you know, so I was ready to walk away from it when it was necessary.
You mentioned that when you were playing basketball, you were 270 pounds. You gained quite a bit of weight, did you not? You were, I mean, I think you've always been bigger going throughout school. As you said, you were a big kid, but you put on a lot of weight, and that's how the nickname Biggie came to be.
Yeah, I was like 189 pounds when I was in 8th grade, so I was already a solid size kid, you know? And I probably stayed around that weight until I broke my leg my junior year, and I gained like 50 or 60 pounds, like boom, right? And then it just never went away. Even though I got back to sports, got back to doing whatever, it just never went away, and I just started to carry it, you know, and then...
And so that at that time, sorry to interrupt, you're like 21, 22, or...
No, 20? Still 18, 19,
okay.
Yeah, you know, and then when I went to college, my freshman year, I was at a junior college, you know, we had like a guy, we called him, his name is Leo, we called it Leo's, hey, you going to Leo's today? And it was just like some generic drinks, some, you know, bottom of the line food that they would give us, and we would just destroy it. So, you know, McDonald's was closed, pizza was free for like the basketball team, so like, it was one of those things where like your options weren't great, and so like you weren't gonna lose weight, you know what I mean? You definitely were gaining the freshman 15 type of thing, and I just kind of always kept that weight. Even when I moved from that junior college to a bigger school, I just kind of kept that weight until I started training MMA, I was training kickboxing and stuff like that, and then the weight just kind of fell off on its own. I wasn't seeking to lose weight. Like, I didn't care. I loved big me. You know what I mean? Like, people are like, hey, aren't you so happy? I'm like, what, I have to eat like asparagus and stuff now? Like, I could have just been eating cheeseburgers, and like I would be the same like happy-go-lucky guy that I am.
You seem like a person who someone, you know, says something about you don't care. You don't care what people think of you at all. That's my read on you. So I take it, I mean, did people make fun of you or say anything? Oh, you're bigger, you're whatever. People made fun of you, but you probably didn't care.
I didn't care, and the reason being is this. Most of the people who were trying to make fun of me because of my size couldn't do the things that I could do, even with them being smaller or looking a certain way. Sure. For me, it was always the way, like, you can't beat me. You can't beat me in this. You weren't better than me at the sport we played at or did anything in. So for me, it was like, why would I allow you to get to me? Like, are you ahead of me in life? Are you better at things than me? Maybe if they were, maybe it would have got to me. But for me, I'm like, what can you say? What can you really say to me that's gonna make me feel bad about myself? Like you can't. You know what I mean? And like, even when I started fighting, when I was bigger, I still was able to do things that people who are smaller couldn't do. You know what I mean? And so like, my size was never a hindrance to me. Like, maybe if I was bigger than I was, and like I couldn't do the same things athletically, maybe then I would have got to myself, and then that would allow them to get in and break in, but I've always had like this steel trap idea of who I am and what I'm capable of, and I don't surprise myself as I do these things.
So you put on that weight after breaking your leg playing basketball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where was I going with this? So you broke your leg. Oh, I was going to ask you something. Broken leg. Oh yeah, so you broke your leg junior year playing basketball, and you put on all the weight after that. Was it just a matter of you couldn't exercise, couldn't play basketball, and so you just?
I think so.
Yeah?
I think so. And then the things I was choosing to eat were not great either. You know what I mean? I'm getting seconds at lunch. I'm eating fast food, and when I think it's kind of a thing too where you see like a high school athlete or a college athlete, once they're done playing, you're like, whoa, they gain a lot of weight. It's because your metabolism is not moving so fast. You're not as active as you're used to being, and so. I was in a wheelchair, had my friends wheeling me around high school, just destroying food all the time. And, and then getting into college, I was introduced to beer and drinking, even I wasn't the legal age. Those things definitely don't help with, losing weight or trying to get rid of weight. So, yeah, it just took on a life of its own. It just kind of kept going.
And so you break your leg and then you start eating all this food and, a mix of can't play basketball, eating all this bad food leads to you gaining 50, 60 pounds. Was the food part of it any sort of depression? Because people eat when they're depressed sometimes.
Maybe I was, but at that point, I don't think depression was even a conversation people were having at that point.
Sure.
Depression and anxiety and stuff like that has jumped into the forefront now. Sure. But at that point, I didn't think so. Like I said, man, I was happy. Like I was still a part of everything. I was still building homecoming floats. I think I was even more popular when I broke my leg because people could wheel me around and not have to be at class on time or anything like that. So, like, for me, it wasn't like a negative thing, man. Like, I don't look at things and allow them to become a negative thing or allow them to be a ruler in my life. I just don't operate that way, and it's strange to certain people.
I guess what I'm asking is, did your diet change when you broke your leg?
No.
So you ate that way before you broke the leg, but it just sort of counteracted because you exercised more.
Yeah, exactly. I think, no kid where I'm from was eating a healthy diet. I don't think nobody, and I think that's one of the things that's wrong with the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Is that they're just now starting to understand health and understand, what is bad for you and what isn't. I think that's the reason why you see the level of diabetes and stuff that you do in inner city youth and kids, because they don't have the ability to get to these better non-GMO, these better meats and stuff like that have been genetically altered and stuff.
Sure.
That's what they have to eat because that's what they can afford, And so I think that I've had a big change in my family because of the way that I eat, that it's helped my mom. My mom used to have diabetes, but she understood and listened to the diet and the things that I said, and it actually reversed, and it's something that she doesn't have to deal with any longer, but it was because of lack of understanding. Everything we cook is an extra pinch of salt, an extra thing, because we're eating for taste, not for health. But I think that's something that's starting to change within the Black community because it's something that hinders us. You see the levels of obesity and stuff like that in our youth. It's starting to go down, I think, because of people are now becoming more educated.
So when you were eating this way, did you know when you were eating those cheeseburgers that it was bad for you?
No, I didn't know anything about like eating right or anything like that until I started fighting. You know what I mean? And that was like the biggest, and that's what I tell people all the time. Like that was one of the bigger, success points as far as fighting goes. Is like I understood and started to understand what should go in your body, what shouldn't. And even if I want to eat these things, at least I know what they are. I used to think that like these fast food places, like this is real meat, this is real this, and then like I come to find out that it's not, you know what I mean, that I'm eating trash, and that's the reason why, I was able to, the reason why I looked that way, or the reason why I was, underperforming still, is because I look at the kids from the other side of the tracks is a term that we use, and they were eating all the right things. I'm like, why are these kids so much bigger than us? Why are these kids so much stronger than us? Like, why are we having to beat these kids on straight athleticism? Is because we didn't understand the value of nutrition and the value of, different kind of training and specific training that these kids were getting as they were younger, that we didn't understand or find out until we were older.
So you quit basketball because you discovered MMA?
Yeah,
right?
I had I had a chance to walk on, no scholarship or anything like that. I had a chance to walk on at the University of Mary in North Dakota, I believe. My teammate Damon Smith, who I played college basketball with, who was from Milwaukee, where I live at now. And I was from Iowa, obviously. You know, it's like this mix. But he went there and played. And another teammate from my school, Vontrell Soroyer, also from Milwaukee, went and played there. And a kid that I grew up playing against and played with, Bailey Caldwell, was there as well. So I'm like, man, I might as well go. The assistant coach was from Waterloo, where I was from. He's like, hey, I'll give you a chance to walk on. You're too big, though. He's like, you got to lose some weight. I need you to lose at least 20 pounds before we'll allow you to try and walk on.
And walk on
means no money, right? So no money for athletics, but I still would have got money for academics. Like like I said, I've always had good grades. School came easy to me, so I could have got a huge part of that academically as far as scholarship go, but no basketball money off the top.
Okay,
like
so
I could
this is
earn
basketball.
It. Yeah,
Okay.
so I could earn the right to play on this team by walking on. So like you walk on, you have the opportunity to play. You're not a athletic scholarship, but you can work your way to that. Where they can give you a partial or they can give you a full ride if they see that you're very important to the team, or you can play a role for the team. So that's the reason why I started going to the gym that I started going to, but then I started fighting or started training to fight without even knowing that I wanted to fight. You know what I mean? It was one of those things where I was taking a cardio kickboxing class with my kindergarten teacher. I held pads for her, she held pads for me. And that's what I was doing, you know. And then I was like, oh, well, what about this other kickboxing class? Started doing that. And I'm like, oh.
Initially, as you said, to lose weight.
Yeah,
so
to lose weight. I was working a factory job, Tyson's. They hired kids that were in college over the summers, give you work while you were, you know, home from college. I was doing that, making money enough to be able to afford to go to this gym, started training, and then boom, I lost a bunch of weight. They're like, hey, you want to fight? I'm like, well, I haven't really even thought about it. Like, oh, well, it's in like a month, so you can do it. And I'm like, all right, cool. Took a fight, I won. I called that assistant coach. I said, man, I'm not coming. I said, I'm staying home. And I found something that I loved more than basketball at that point. And it just took over right away.
Why do you think you fell in love with the sport?
Honestly, I can't tell you.
No?
I think it's just one of those things where, like, it was ordained, man. You know, for me, I feel like I'm a very religious guy, and I just feel like it's never your time, you know. For me, it's like it's not my plan, you know what I mean? And like things that I want to be there, or things that I want to happen might not happen, but there's always something else there. And I felt like that door just opened for me, and it was something I was good at. You know, I've obviously fought growing up, so I wasn't afraid to do these things.
Sure.
I wrestled growing up. I did karate and taekwondo growing up, you know, here or there. And so for me, when I found it, it was like, oh, this is cool. You know, I get to fight people, I get to train and do these things, and it just kind of stuck. And then after I fought, my first fight was like, it was at heavyweight against a guy who had already had like 10 amateur fights or something like that. He was way bigger than me. It was fight of the night. We beat the crap out of each other. My eyes were swollen shut the next day. Like my friends had to literally break the crust away from my eyes, and they would barely open. Like it was bad, you know, but I won. And I was like, yo, what is this feeling? I need more of this, you know? And then it just became like a drug, man. I got addicted to it.
Do you think fighting growing up and you ended up a professional MMA fighter?
It's funny to everybody else. Everyone else is like, man, they don't see it as like this huge, like random thing. Like for me, this is random as heck.
Okay.
You know, like there were fights going on in my city as I was growing up that I never knew about. Like people were hosting fights. My teammates had 10, 12 pro fights like in the city. Had no clue. This was like its own little underground world. Like I wasn't one of the people who were like, oh, I watched WEC or I watched this or Pride or anything like that. I didn't watch anything. I didn't know about it. And I think I maybe watched one fight, Chuck Liddell back in the day when I was like maybe a junior in high school or a senior in high school, and some friends invited me over to watch it, but it wasn't something that was like in my realm of thinking. But everyone's like, man, the way you fought growing up, this makes sense. Or the way you played basketball, because I was so physical, this makes sense. You know, to everyone else, this makes sense as a easy transition. But to me, it wasn't. To me, it was like out of left field. I was like, this couldn't have been something that was like formulated in my own mind. Like I said, I feel like this was just ordained for me to find. My feet were already set on this path, even though I didn't know it.
Well, it's interesting, and this might not be fair because there's probably just as many fighters in the UFC today that don't have a background where they fought when their childhood, but there's a lot of stories similar where they did, run into trouble growing up, get into fights, and they ended up, making money punching other people in the face. Do you think you said for you it's random, but the personality of average MMA fighters, is it connected?
Yeah, I think it fits.
Yeah.
It fits. Now that I'm here and I'm doing it, it fits. But for me, like I said in the beginning, it was something that I never saw. It wasn't even known to me to be able to be like, hey, maybe this would fit me or that kind of thing. For me, martial arts was always to do the opposite. Every other martial art I ever did was to take away, the aggression or the fighting. It was to be able to control yourself. It was to try to make you, more in control of your body and of your emotions and those kind of things. So for me, like I said, it's so random, man. It's so random. That's why people are like, hey, you do this, you do. Like for me, man, I'm on a roller coaster and I'm just along for the ride. This whole thing has just been one long ride for me, and so I'm still on the roller coaster.
If I asked 18-year-old Mike Biggie Rhodes, where are you when you're 29, what would you have said?
Police officer or firefighter.
Okay. How come?
With getting in so much trouble, there was two very important people in my life. Officer Greenlee, and then Officer Harris, who were like liaison officers within the school. They helped me, man. They were my father figures type of thing. They would come to me, and if I got in trouble, they would try to talk and understand why I did what I did. They didn't really judge me or condemn me for my actions. I think they saw me for what I was, a lost boy trying to be a man, and making mistakes. But they helped me so much that's what I wanted to do. I felt like I could make a difference from that angle. And then being a firefighter, I just always found that as being cool. Like, to me, you are a hero if you're a firefighter,
Sure.
Or a police officer. I mean, today's age and stuff like that, obviously cops and those kind of things are not being shown in the brightest of lights, but at the end of the day, man, they do a job that not many would do or could do, and then the firefighters, they do a lot of things that people wouldn't do or shouldn't do. They put their lives on the line. And so for me, it's always just a level of respect that comes with that. And I feel like as being someone who came from nothing to have one of those positions, I would have been, seen in a different light.
And so with the transition to MMA, you mentioned that, again, you went to that cardio kickboxing class just to lose the weight for basketball, and then you ended up telling your coach, hey, I'm not doing this. So you kind of fell in love with the sport before even fighting.
Yeah, right away, man. Right as I started to do it, for me, it was new.
Even though it was just training. It wasn't actually the fight. But
yeah, it was new. To me, it was new, and I've always liked the chance to do new things. I've always liked the ability, because I didn't have a chance to when I was growing up, So, like, having the opportunity to do that made me want to do it more. And then I'm instantly the type of person that when I do something, I want to be great at it. And this comes off the wrong way. People always say it. I don't really care, though. Everything that I've put my mind to, I've been good at. Never played soccer before my sophomore year of high school. I got college offers to play goalie in college. Basketball, I put my mind to it. I was able to make it to college. I felt like if I would have put that same focus after breaking my leg back into football, I could have did it for football. I feel like the things that I touch and I focus in on, I'm able to be good at those things. And it pisses a lot of people off. My friends get so mad. They're like, hey, you want to play pool? And then they figure out I'm good at pool. Even I don't play it that often. Like, hey, you want to play darts? And I'm good at darts. Even though I don't play it that often. For me, I just have this ability to pick things up very quickly.
Just natural.
Yeah, and if I stick with it, I can be good at it. I don't stick with a lot of those things. Sure. But like if I did, I could be good at it. And for me, that's always been something that I loved. It's like, hey, well, can you do this? Like, not right now, but if you give me a day or two, I can pick it up and I'll be good at it. And it just pisses people off, and for me, it's just fun. It's a fun thing.
How did you end up in Milwaukee?
My two teammates, Joe Cason, who fought for Strike Force, the Challenger Series or Contender Series they used to have, and then Roy Jones, who also fought for that Strike Force Contender team. They were like the big name pros in my area, and I actually lived with Joe when I was into college because he played linebacker at Northern Iowa the University of North Carolina. He played football there, and so we met. I lived with him, and he's actually the reason why I went to the gym that I started training. They were like 10-0, 11-1 or something like that, and they needed bigger and better training partners, you know. So Joe's guardian was looking at some gyms, like, hey, I want to see you there, I want to see you there, I'm going to see you this place. You tell me which one you like, and then you move there. So Roufusport was number one. They're like, hey, you want to go with? I'm still in college. I'm taking schoolwork with me. I'm literally, once we got to Roufusport, I'm sitting in the gym doing homework. What got me training is Anthony, right? It's crazy. It's surreal. Like, you never really think of it. Other new dudes are training. I'm doing schoolwork. Anthony Pettis walks in. At this time, he's just regular Anthony Pettis. I think he had maybe just did the kick off the cage or was like in the process of doing that. He said, hey, why you got schoolwork? Did you not bring your stuff? Go get your stuff. Let's train. And I'm like, oh shit, okay. Like, I'm one fight amateur being invited to train at this high level school with these high level people that I knew I didn't deserve to be on the mat with, but I'm not going to turn down that invite, you know? And so I go and I train, and I loved it. And Duke loved me because I literally showed up to every session that I could be a part of. I did all the work that I could. I tried to train with everybody that I could, and I tried to soak up every bit of knowledge that I could. And he saw that, and he goes, hey, if you want to come back for the summer and live here, you'll stay at my fighter house. As long as you do every session, you can stay here for free. I did every session. I stayed there. He said, hey, if you want to make this a real thing, I think you could be great at it. And he said, you should move here. I went back to college. That was probably the worst thing you could tell me because I was like really done with school already. And as soon as he told me that, I was like, all right, Mom, I'm going to school for one more semester and I'm out of here. That semester was terrible for me. Probably the worst grades I've ever got because I was so checked out. I was done with it, you know, and I knew at that point that fighting is what I was going to do, and Milwaukee is where I was going to live. And I sold the motorcycle that I had at that point that I really didn't know how to ride anyway for more than I paid for it. The student loan that I took from the school that I probably still need to pay back. I didn't pay back any of it. So that money got me up to Milwaukee. I took a job working security in a bar, trained every day, put in the work, and still there, still growing.
At that point, you knew you were going to do this
I
professionally.
knew it.
UFC maybe.
I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to be good at it because of the love and the passion that I have for it. That if you get into this sport for dollars, which a lot of people do now because there's dollars in the sport. When I got into it, it's because I genuinely loved to train, and I still do. And that's the reason why I'm a mat rat. You know what I mean? Like, I live to train. Like, I don't like to take big gaps. Like, I'll fight, and if I'm healthy, I'm back in the gym right away. I don't need a week away. That's what I love to do. I don't want to do anything else, and I feel like that's why I have the ability to grow. I feel like that's the reason why I grew at the rate that I grew.
Well, you mentioned that you're good at everything, but you don't stick with everything. MMA was something you stuck with. You trained, you fought on the local circuit, you made it to UFC. What was that like? As someone who, as you said, kind of came from nothing on this big stage, FS1, national television.
It was quick.
Quick?
It was quick.
That's how you describe it?
Yeah, it was quick. As quick as it came, it was gone, obviously, you know, with how things went. But it was quick, you know? Like, I look back at it now. At that point, I was like, yeah, I'm so deserving. I need to be there. I beat these people. I'm good enough to beat everybody there. Found out that wasn't the case. But, I mean, I had only been training for 2.5 years, maybe 3 years total at that point. You're
still only 29.
Yeah.
And not like you're 35, 40.
You know, and the thing is like, I felt like they put a hold on me a little bit by slowing me down, only giving me a fight every 6 months or whatever. You know, that didn't help me. That kind of stunted my growth. I feel like I could have won some fights in the UFC if I would have been more active. Which, like, once I got out of the UFC, I fought a bunch right away. Boom, 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 running up fights again. And then, you know, signed to Bellator, took a fight, and then they didn't honor my contract that they had said they would. And then that put me on the back burner for 8 or 9 months. And it's like, ever since that kind of happened to me, I've been having these long breaks in between fights, and it just kills me because I love to fight, you know what I mean? And like, I feel like I'm more comfortable, I get better the more I fight.
What did your family think when you were signed to the UFC initially?
I mean, at that point, my mom had probably only watched 2 fights, like visually watched 2 fights. My sisters love it because they get to tell people that their brother is a fighter, and, you know, they love that I'm successful, so they brag about me and stuff like that. Not even just to brag, but just they're so happy for me, and that, you know, I'm always able to chase my dreams, and I feel like they love that. You know, that like I never let Waterloo keep me. You know, I had to get out of there. I had to go and be better for myself. And I feel like they just love that for me, and it shows my nieces and nephews that, hey, you can get out of this place, you can be successful, and you can do it. So for me, they were happy. They were, you know, they're still worried every time I fight, but like they understand that this is what I love to do, and they're all about it.
What you said about getting stuck in Waterloo is interesting to me. Do you almost feel like not necessarily just Waterloo specifically as a city, but certain people, you know, you don't have everything in life. You know, you don't have a terrible childhood, don't have a terrible life, but you're not rich. Do you almost feel like people are they get enclosed and they can't break free, and they don't almost try to?
Yeah, and I feel like people do that to themselves. It's a level of comfort. They're comfortable. Comfort is the killer of dreams. It truly is. Because if you're too comfortable doing what you're doing, you won't try to do that other thing that you really want to do. You know, and especially if you have family. You know, like my sisters had kids early and stuff like that. So they were never able to live out what they maybe wanted to do. You know? I don't have any children. I don't have any family outside of my nieces and nephews that I love. But I've always been able to be selfish. I've always been able to worry about number one. And for that, I feel like that's the reason why I was able to get out. You know, it's like, but my mom and my sisters knew I had to get out, or else I would be like everybody else that stayed in Waterloo. You know,
right.
It is.
So you knew not to stay comfortable.
You knew
there
for
was
sure.
Something better out there.
Yeah, and it's a crab in the bucket mentality in that place. And so if you never heard that expression, it's one of those things where, you know, people want to see you do good, but not better than them. And so once you start to, they want to pull you back down. That crab in the bucket mentality. You're about to get out. Nope, come back here. Let me bring you back down. And for me, I just couldn't allow it. You know, I didn't want to be stuck there. I have friends that were, you know, highly touted athletes that were going to Division I schools to play basketball, Division I schools to play football, and they allowed the city to trap them, you know, and now, you know, they're doing whatever they're doing. But I know for a fact if they would have got out, they could have been successful too. And so for me, that was always a motivating factor. And it's one of the reasons why I still live in Milwaukee. You know, like I could go back home and train. There's a gym there, you know, that's where I started. But like, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I wouldn't be able to grow. I wouldn't be able to be the person that I am because everything there is small-minded people trying to keep you down and keep you at the level of success they think you should have instead of the level of success you can grow to if you're elsewhere. You
said the UFC was quick. It was quick to get there. Now that it's been 3.5 years since I think your last UFC fight was the Eric Silva one, I believe.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken. Do you wish it happened later on? No?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm grateful for it happening when it did. Like I said, man, like my understanding of my religion is this. What you want isn't always the timing of it, you know? God's plan for you is his plan for you. You know, it's Tyron Woodley said this to me the last time he was in Milwaukee. He said, delayed, never denied. You know, and so for me, it was something that maybe I needed to grow. If I don't have that, I'm less of a man than I am now. I'm less of a person. I'm less of a fighter than I am because I didn't get a chance to get those experiences. You know, I stood toe to toe with Robert Whittaker. Yeah. You know how much confidence that puts in my head when I fight anybody else? What could you do to me that man didn't try to do to me? Like, he's one of the perennial powerhouses in all of fighting. Yeah. Look at the people he's knocked out. Look at the people he's defeated, you know? And I pushed him to the brink. I pushed him. I think besides Joel, I think I'm one of the only decisions that Robert Whittaker has in his title run or his run to get the title and still having it. You know, I'm not the same person that I could be or would be because if I hadn't went through that fire, you know, I needed to be shaped and molded and perfected in that fire. I needed that.
So I believe it was January 2015, February, somewhere around there, you got cut from the UFC. Since then, you've been fighting local circuit, LFA coming up tomorrow. Bellator, you had one fight there, Victory FC, some fights home in Iowa, Prestige FC up in Saskatchewan, Canada. You've been sort of all over the continent, so to speak. Are you happy with how things have gone over the past 4 years or so?
Obviously, I would have liked to win every single fight that I was in. That didn't happen. But I'm grateful for the opportunities. I'm grateful for the experiences. Like I said, you need these different fires to mold you to be able to grow, you know. ACB, I fought for them over in England. Man, I'm a kid from Iowa. A lot of my people in my family have never been on an airplane. I've been to different places and countries and stuff that they probably only imagined to go. So for me, it's been a great experience, you know. And also, like, fighting on those shows, like, I wasn't too big to go back home and fight my hometown. Those are the people that love me. They love to see me fight. They support me. Why wouldn't I go fight there, you know? Why wouldn't I go fight for VFC? Why wouldn't I fight for LFA? You know, I can't say again because it was RFA when I fought for them, but why wouldn't I fight for the LFA? This is a great organization. This is at the level that I should be fighting right now, you know, until I prove otherwise. And then after that, all right, let's go where I need to be, where I need to go. But for right now, you're not bigger. People are too big for their britches. Right now, I fit mine perfectly.
It's interesting to me because you're still only 29. You got cut when you were 25, 26, 24?
Yeah, I think maybe 24.
You're super. That's very. I mean, a lot of people don't get signed that young.
Yeah.
Everybody have a few fights and things don't go your way and get cut. This whole part of your career happened earlier than I think it happens for most people. So you have time to make it back. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think that when I was on that 4-fight winning streak, right when I got cut, before I had the Bellator fight, when I signed the Bellator deal, I actually got offered to fight on the Contender Series.
Okay.
But I had already signed the Bellator, so that kind of kiboshed that thing. But I figure if I don't do the Bellator fight and I go fight for Contenders, good performance, I get signed, I get brought back, or at least I'm in the line to come back on short notice. That loss kind of put me back, you know, and then I had a couple fights get canceled, and then I fought ACB. I lost to a very tough Russian kid, Ibrahim Shishagayev or something like that. We're friends now. He's cool. But that was a tough fight. You know, he's one of the top guys over there in Russia and in Europe, period. So I've always taken tough fights, though. You know, you can't look at my record and see too many names that you're like, oh, I don't know that guy, or oh, I don't know that guy. Like, you see my record is it's not padded. I fought real fights, you know. And so for me, that's something that I hang my hat on. You know, I fought real fights. And so I'm cool with it. You know what I mean? Like, it everything happens for a reason, man. As cliche as people want to, you know, overuse that, but I truly believe that. And like I said, without those things, I'm not who I am today. And I would not want to be anybody other than who I am. So I'm happy for those things.
You're cool with where you're at because, as you said, you're not bigger than this. Other people aren't bigger than where they're at. As you said, things happen for a reason. It makes sense in some way, depending how you look at it. But that having said that, do you want to make it back to the UFC? Is that
Of course.
Of course. Why wouldn't you?
I want to be where the best are because I think I am one of the best. And I feel like on any given night, I can beat any one of those guys. And if I didn't think that, I would stop fighting. And I would go do something else and hopefully be good at it.
And as I said, you're only 29. You have a lot of years left, I would imagine.
Yeah. I'll fight as long as my body allows me, you know. Also, as long as I'm not like some middle-of-the-road journeyman type of thing, you know. Like, if I'm successful in the sport, I'll stick around in it, you know, which I think I can be. You know, wins or losses come in groups. You know, they ever flow one way or the other. And, you know, who knows? You know, 4 or 5 in a row. I can be right back there where I know I belong, where I know I can compete, where I know I can beat a lot of people.
It seems like you haven't been as active as you would like to be.
Yeah.
Has that been difficult over the past 2-3 years?
Yeah. People not wanting to fight me, right? I'm not an easy matchup. I'm not somebody that like a lot of people are jumping at to fight. You know, injuries. You know, getting hurt. You know, close to fights or right before fights. Part of the game, though. You know, I didn't get injured early on. You know, I fought for 4 or 5 years without really having a major injury, and then boom, injury. And so the things happen, though. You know, it's a part of the game. It is a dangerous sport and that we compete in and that you have to train hard to get ready for. So, you know, sometimes you don't make it to the fight date, but that's just all a part of the game. And I feel like I said, those are all just experiences that can help me later on.
What do you think it'll take to get back there, to get back to the UFC? You had a winning streak right after the Eric Silva fight. It's been up and down since. You haven't stayed as active as you'd like. What does it take to get back there?
Get back active. Get fights that mean something. Stick around where I'm at. You know, the LFA is a great organization. They've really turned into a feeder league for the UFC, and you know, I made it there from the RFA. If I can get the wins now and put on spectacular performances, I feel like I can be there soon. It's not something that's far off. If I get the results that I should get in fights and I put on the show that I'm capable of putting on, it won't take very long.
If you could go back, I don't know, 18-year-old Mike Biggie Rhodes, 19, 20, give that person one piece of advice, what would it be?
Honestly, I wouldn't.
No?
Nope. He's good the way he is, you know? That's one of those things where it's a double-edged sword. I go back and I tell him something. Every I, every T is dotted a little bit different, you know what I mean? And so for me, allow him to make those mistakes. Don't try and make the road or the path for him any easier. You know, you won't get the same person. You know, I wouldn't be the same guy that I am. I'm happy for everything that's ever happened to me in my life. I'm not a victim. Never will be. I'm never a victim. I look at that situation and it either helped me to grow or it forced me to grow. Maybe when I didn't want to, you know, or maybe even before I needed to. But timing, man, like I said, it ain't my time, it's his time. When I should experience something or go through something, it's on his clock. And so those things can't be wrong for me. So I would take every bump in the road, every injury I've had, every loss, every situation that I've encountered, and I would hope that it was the same.
Mike Biggie Rhodes, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.